Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a seriously mind-bending idea. We're going to unpack how a massive convergence of AI and cryptography could literally upgrade human society's operating system. We're talking about shifting from a zero-sum game into a truly cooperative post-scarcity world. This isn't just an incremental update, we are looking at a fundamental shift in how human beings interact, how we coordinate, and ultimately how we survive.
So, let's kick things off with a slightly insulting but honestly fascinating question. Is our modern, hyper-connected world still basically operating like a primitive petri dish? Because, when you really look closely at how our traditional markets and legal systems function, they look a lot less like an advanced unified organism and a whole lot more like a bunch of isolated microbes just fighting over limited resources.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the biology of win-win. Then look at the decay of human trust, explore society's new nervous system, map out the post-scarcity transition, and finally discuss safeguarding human freedom.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the biology of win-win. First, we need to establish our baseline.
Think about a single-celled world for a second. Survival there is totally a zero-sum game. You just consume your neighbor or steal their nutrients. It's easy, right? It requires zero complex communication. But a multicellular organism? That is an ongoing, incredibly complex peace treaty. Trillions of cells are literally giving up their total autonomy to maintain a shared, stable environment. But here's the catch. Maintaining that win-win state takes a massive toll in energy. You need these incredibly complex signaling networks, like hormones and immune systems, just to prevent internal cheating. And biological cheating, by the way, is what we call cancer. So win-win isn't just some nice ideological ideal. It's a massive, real-world engineering challenge and alignment.
To pull off this kind of multicellular cooperation on a global human scale, we need something economists call mechanism design. Basically, this is the art of setting up the rules of the game so that inherently selfish people naturally just do the cooperative thing, and crucially, doing it without needing a totalitarian police force constantly looking over their shoulder. But our traditional systems, things like basic laws and representative democracy, they are simply too low bandwidth to manage 8 billion non-identical human cells manually. We just cannot compute the real-time, multivariable complexity required to make sure everyone benefits without someone having to lose.
Which brings us to Section 2 and a really critical breaking point, the decay of human trust.
Our current signaling network, which is basic human trust, is decaying rapidly under the pressure of technological acceleration. The timeline of our promises is violently shrinking right now. Historically, trust worked perfectly because society moves slowly. A 30-year mortgage or a 10-year trade agreement made complete sense back then because the underlying environment was largely static. But today, thanks to exponential tech growth, a contract you sign in 2024 might be completely obsolete in 18 months. When one party is legally bound to a rigid promise while the whole environment completely shifts around them, well, that contract transforms from a win-win structure into a win-lose trap.
We've always relied on legal systems to backstop our trust, but human courts operate on linear time. They literally take years to resolve disputes, while the tech cycle takes months. The transaction cost of litigating simply outpaces the value of the original agreement. We desperately need a faster way to coordinate. To put it perfectly, trust is a temporal bridge, but when the rate of change approaches infinity, the bridge collapses under the weight of unforeseen variables. That is absolutely spot on.
Okay, Section 3, society's new nervous system. If the old system of human trust is too slow and fragile, what's the actual fix?
We fix this by building society an entirely new central nervous system. And that starts by moving our agreement logic onto trustless code. This eliminates the friction of clunky legal systems for routine, everyday interactions. With smart contracts, execution becomes deterministic. That means if an event occurs, the state is updated and the asset transfers instantly. Boom, done. You don't have to trust that the other person will keep their promise in 5 years, and you certainly don't have to trust a human judge to punish them if they don't. You just verify the code. This is huge. It shifts us completely away from promise-based trust and directly into real-time verification.
Now take those smart contracts and combine them with autonomous AI agents. Suddenly, you've got programs dynamically arbitrating complex preferences across millions of people simultaneously. Human negotiation is just way too slow for this. But imagine your own personal AI agent, knowing your exact energy tolerances, your schedule, your budget constraints, and it's out there micro-negotiating with millions of other agents in fractions of a second. No single human is making a manual choice. Instead, the agent swarm dynamically finds a Pareto optimal equilibrium, meaning a state where resources are allocated so incredibly efficiently that no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. And it's happening continuously, right at the edge of the network.
Think of our traditional legal system kind of like biological hormones. It diffuses slowly through the bloodstream over days, months, or even years. But an AI, an Internet of Things mesh network, that acts as a true high-speed central nervous system. It processes millions of inputs with sub-millisecond massive parallel bandwidth. It's instantly reallocating resources before conflicts even have a chance to arise.
Moving into Section 4, the post-scarcity transition. What does this massive nervous system upgrade actually look like for our economy?
So this transition happens in phases. Right now, we're in the scarcity legacy economy. You trade your labor for wages. But as AI displaces human labor, and before physical goods become completely free, we have to inject cash, universal basic income, into the system. If we don't, aggregate demand simply collapses. But here's the thing. UBI is merely a temporary stepping stone. It's just the scaffolding. Once our automated grid of robotics, solar power, and precision agriculture fully matures, we transition to true universal basic assets. At that point, basic utilities become non-excludable public infrastructure. We literally stop giving people money to buy energy and simply give them direct access to the automated energy itself.
And once those physical survival logistics are handled entirely by machine networks, well, humans are finally freed up to climb Maslow's hierarchy into pure self-actualization. When humanoid robots and 6G cloud compute clear the biological table of scarcity, human effort experiences this profound shift from utility to meaning. We move away from doing things just because we have to survive, and we pivot towards pure craftsmanship, deep philosophy, and hyper-local community building. We don't stop striving, not at all. We just redirect all that energy toward endeavors where human presence is the entire point.
But wait, Section 5, safeguarding human freedom. We definitely need to talk about the giant glowing elephant in the room here.
How do we prevent this highly coordinated, automated system from turning into a dystopian surveillance state? Because there's a razor-thin line between utopia and a total nightmare here. A social credit system uses your access to basic human needs as a weapon to force compliance, which leads to total paranoia and absolute conformity. But a guaranteed foundation? That flips the script entirely. Access to housing, energy, and food becomes an unconditional, hard-coded baseline. When citizens know their floor is secure and literally cannot be arbitrarily revoked by some central authority, it creates this deep psychological safety, and it actually encourages bold, constructive risk-taking.
So to make sure algorithmic tyranny doesn't become our reality, we have to hard-code protocol-level constraints to mathematically prohibit systemic weaponization. We cannot just sit back and rely on political goodwill. First, we use zero-knowledge proofs. This is essentially cryptographic magic that lets you prove you're a valid citizen entitled to resources without ever revealing your actual identity or your behavioral history. Second, we use immutable distribution. That means the smart contracts are locked down. No central bureaucrat has a kill switch to suddenly freeze your access. And third, everything happens via air-gapped local verification, so there is no centralized database tracking your every move.
And the ultimate legal safeguard here? It's a complete separation of governance and baseline provisioning. Just like we have the separation of church and state, we need a constitutional firewall preventing the state and judicial courts from conditioning or revoking the automated delivery infrastructure. Even if someone commits a crime, their basic right to automated food and shelter cannot be punitively turned off. It becomes an unalienable API right, completely separate from behavioral policing.
And here's the really beautiful part. By building a hard, unshakable floor under human survival, we actually liberate human competition. We turn it from a desperate struggle into a voluntary arena for mastery. Think about it. When you're fighting for your survival, you play it safe, you hoard information, and you view your competitors as existential threats. But when your baseline is completely secure, you enter voluntary arenas like scientific races, extreme sports, or massive artistic movements. Your rival is no longer an enemy trying to starve you out. They are your greatest collaborator, pushing you to your absolute peak.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. If technology successfully removes the friction of basic survival, literally transforming us from competing single cells into a truly cooperative, multicellular global organism, what would you build, master, or compete in if your survival was permanently guaranteed?